People tend to do online what they want to do in real life or have done in real life.
They touched her avatar's breast and pressed against her rhythmically, telling her that she wanted it. My physical body responded.
Because people are like, oh, why don't you just take the headphones off?
Well, part of the challenge is they're not yet seen as crimes. Problem number one. This is for everyone, especially if you are a parent. We are exposing the growing concerns for some immersive experiences. Be equipped and know how to protect yourself. Join myself and guest panelist Kendra Sims, licensed clinical social worker. Please don't forget, click subscribe and give us a thumbs up so we can get this information to others. For a lot of people hearing this for the very first time, this is going to be kind of shocking, right? The thought of people experiencing some type of sexual assault in the virtual world, for some people, they won't be able to accept that this is actually a thing. So help us understand why this is a thing.
Well, one of the things that comes to mind is human nature and perversion. It happens. It has been happening. And anytime there's a new platform, a new way for foolishness to take place, that it always sort of seeps in. I think for me, when I first heard virtual sex crimes as a topic, I'm like, how does that, what do you mean? And then I realized, I said, you know what, if I stop trying to make it make sense in terms of how can someone be assaulted in this manner and just look at what assault is. Mm-hmm. It's when a person is violated, right? When people say that they've been verbally assaulted, you know, like you don't necessarily have to hit me with a stick. What's the old saying, sticks and stones, right? But they say that, but then the words end up hurting anyway. So I sort of just normalized what I understood to be assault, and then I took it a step further, and I'm like, okay, if I'm thinking about virtual sex crimes, and I'm thinking about all the things when they always talk about, with our kids and adults too, about internet safety and all of those things. We do that. Why? Because we don't want to be harmed. We don't want someone to take advantage of us online. And this is this is like the segue into that.
We've heard the internet is evil, the social media is evil, and the blame is always on the actual tool. And not to say that there are measures that kind of make certain experiences less safe, or certain experiences more likely to happen. That is the responsibility of some of these platforms. But a lot of it has to do with human nature and how people continue to interact. And in some sense, our failure to kind of rehab these individuals who struggle with perversion of various kind. There was a New York Times article recently that talked about certain parents, or just a trend of parents who we'll use very simple words to describe it. You draw your own conclusions, but they were essentially utilizing the popularity of their kids on social media platforms to create special access for individuals who wanted to see certain types of posts that weren't readily available. So kind of when we think of adults, we think of these fan-only accounts. And fan-only accounts give you access to certain content that people who are not subscribed to you won't get access to. So these parents are utilizing their kids' accounts to lure or to utilize certain individuals who are more likely to be, I would say, pedophiles, to then, or I'm sure they won't label it as such, but I don't see who else would want special content from kids, because kids aren't going to pay for it. So it's some adult paying for it. But what they did find was exactly that they found that these men were more likely to pay for these special access to these accounts so that they can get exposed or additional access to the kids or certain contents about the kids. So it's alarming. It's alarming. And I say all of that to say that here is a platform where people are utilizing different tools to become influencers or gain popularity, create brands, which has its innocence, right? So you want to make a living for yourself. You want to perhaps create funds for your kids to go to college. And here's an opportunity that it is a simpler opportunity as opposed to kind of the crab in the barrel feel of society where you're trying to make a way. And they're making a way, but now it's creating access to individuals who are perverted. And that's kind of what this whole issue is. You have individuals who are still very sick and who are mentally sick, and perverted, and now they're utilizing what was intended to be a platform or some type of interaction that allow people to socialize in a virtual context, and are now using it to cause harm. And these cases are not simple. So I want to make sure that people are aware of how serious these cases are. There was one, Nina Jane Patel, whose words I shared at the beginning, who shared that my physical body was responding. And the reason why she shared that is because she wanted to make sure that the message was clear that even though it's a virtual experience, there are still physical manifestations of your virtual experience. And we see this on videos that we laugh at. I'm guilty of laughing at some of these videos on social platforms where you see people who are wearing these headsets and they are interacting with their real environment in ways that are peculiar because they're so immersed in these experiences. So they walk into things.
What was that? Oh my God.
They fight
They
things
hit
that aren't
things, they
there,
kick things, tripping over them.
Right. And that's, there's a lot of psychology that goes into the creation of these technology. The intent is that your body experiences something that is primarily a mental experience, a visual mental experience. So they tap into an area of the brain where they're able to then cause physical manifestations, right? You're playing something, and this all started with the gaming industry, right? With the gaming industry, you're not immersed into it, but the intent of the gaming industry in certain ways is to have you have the real like or simulated experiences. So your heart starts to beat real fast. You start to experience emotions of fear or joy or whatever the game is trying to elicit out of you. And so these are intentionally done. So it's not unreasonable for someone who is having a sexual violent experience to have the same physical experiences as if it was happening in real life. And so with her experience, she described having 3 male figures surround her avatar in Horizon venues, which is supposed to host live events programmed by Meta. They touched her avatar's breast and pressed against her rhythmically, telling her that she wanted it. And a 4th avatar recorded or took a picture of the incident. So very, very violating experiences. And the one that really caught our attention at the top of the year was the report of the child that was under the age of 16. We don't know a lot of details about the child for obvious reasons, but this is someone in the UK who's we do know that she's under the age of 16, who was sexually attacked by a gang of adult men in an immersive game experience. And the reports are that she is having the same psychological effects as someone who had a real life attack. So, these experiences are, and they're not isolated. There have been a number of other reports and experiences going all the way back to one of the most public ones that was documented in 2016. And some of these incidences have been happening to individuals who are intentionally on there doing research. The irony of it all. So that being said, one of the critique about this, Kendra, is the fact that people are trying to understand now, what do we do? People are having these experiences. We don't really have regulations. What is really the next step?
So there is so much to digest, and I have a lot of thoughts. One is if you simplify, because sometimes we have a tendency to overcomplicate things because we're like, what about this? And what if, we start tossing in 1,000 examples, but if you just simplify it, it is a form of virtual harassment or cyberbullying, as been named before. And so you handle those things accordingly. If your child told you that someone was, constantly harassing them or posting whatever of them online, you will respond accordingly. You would take it to whomever, if it's the students at the school or if it's adults that's doing it, you report it to whomever those authorities or whatever that be. But it's so deep. And I'm telling you, at first I struggled because I didn't want to feel like am I empathizing with her? Like, am I crazy? Like, what's going on? And then even as I'm listening to you talk, I said, you know what? I said like this: if you tell me that you lost someone, and you tell me the story and how all the things, I would feel for you, even without me knowing that person. I could begin to open up and start pulling from some of my own grief, my own history, right? Even without your experience happening to me.
Yeah.
So I think in the sense of simplifying it and normalizing that you can have empathy for someone. I think that's one of the things that you do is starting by not just discounting someone's experience. I think to be fair, you just you take it for what it is, even without you having to, we want to get all the answers and get all the background before we form an opinion. And sometimes it's just like you seem to be so affected by it, just a gracious, I'm sorry that happened to you.
Yeah.
And it's such a roller coaster. And even when you think about like just simulations and things of that nature, roller coasters do this. I'm like, I'm a Disney World girl. I've been on several rides, and I'm like, I know I am not in outer space, but it feels like I am. There's Mars over there, I think. Like, and you feel like you are a part of it. Like, I feel like
that's a great correlation.
I feel like, you know what I'm saying? You have those, and I know that I'm on the ground. Even in Universal, like I'm in the little Simpsons ride. I know I'm still in this little room. Same room I walked into, just another side of it. But you still feel it. You still feel the bumps. You still feel all of those things. And so I don't think it's fair to discount what someone experiences. But another thing that as you were talking about either, both of those experiences, I'm like, you know what? People tend to do online what they want to do in real life or have done in real life. We talk about, internet gangsters just got all the say all this stuff and then cowards in real life. You feel like it's okay to sexually assault an avatar, like, oh, it's just a cartoon, oh, it's just this, it's not real. But why is that your thinking?
Right.
Why is that something that you're just like, okay?
Out of all the things you can possibly do in these virtual experiences.
Because it's not like, oh, we're playing a game and like everybody is, I don't know, like shooting down cans. Like we're all not doing, like this is something that you are intentionally doing. Like this isn't the mission of the game or the activity or the interaction. If the mission of that, specifically interaction was for it to be swingers and everybody was in there doing whatever, then that's one thing because at that point I'm entering that room. By entering that room, I'm giving you consent for us to have this shared experience.
Right.
But even still, if I change my mind, I can leave.
You can still change your mind. Right.
And I think it's also on the other side of that, as someone who, if I'm thinking of a person who's immersed in that, sometimes, because people are like, oh, why don't you just take the headphones off, or why don't you just? But sometimes you're not even processing that because you're so in shock. The only way I can think of it, one of my friends, she was on a Zoom call. And I had no clue she was on a Zoom call. I was just like, how you're like, oh, let me call. I call my homegirl, and I video chat her or whatever. And she was like, oh my God, Ken, thank you so much for calling me. And I was just like, what's going on? I was just calling to see if you finished your laundry because you were
right. Everyday stuff,
just regular stuff. And she said, Kendra, I was on the weirdest Zoom call, and I'm like, what? And so she's telling me. People were talking about some stuff that we don't agree with, and it was just, but it was like kind of, and she was. I was like, why didn't you just walk out? She said, Kendra, I didn't even think about it. I was just like, oh my God, like what is this? I don't want to be. But she couldn't, and she, for if you want to think about like where she's an attorney, like she has all the faculty,
right.
She's good. So, and sometimes you are just so like locked in. And you just don't even know what to do, but it affects everybody at all ages.
Right. And the intent of the way, like, people, I think underestimate sometimes just how intentional these platforms are about making you really so zoned out to reality and so zoned into the universe that they're creating, that they are able to, whether from color schemes, we know this from even marketing, all the neuropsych that goes into the color schemes they choose, the sounding that they choose in music, that oftentimes is so intentional that it locks you in, that it makes you addicted, that it makes
You're
you,
literally trapped.
yes, that you're more likely to feel this trap. And I do think that we are to hold a lot of these platforms to have some level of responsibilities. And I know that the metaverse have this safe zone where the avatar, you're able to basically place your avatar into a bubble and no one can interact with your avatar or do anything to your avatar until you release that safe zone. And so they have created this quote unquote measure to help individuals create some boundaries where they can feel safe. But again, to your point, when you are so intentionally immersed into an experience, sometimes even what seems like a logical response, like taking the headphones off, which some people have responded to individuals who have shared their experiences in very unpleasant ways. They've said that, and so I think people just don't really realize, and I love the fact that you made the analogy to the amusement park experiences. You're so immersed that even your logical thinking in some ways becomes suppressed to allow you to truly experience this particular experience, whatever that experience is. But these stories are growing in numbers, and they have so much precedence behind them. The gaming industry, apparently, which I didn't know how many issues occurred in the gaming industry until I became exposed to this particular issue. But the gaming industry apparently has been struggling for years with racism, sexism, and harassment, to the point where there was a time period called Gamergate in 2014, where there was a trend of female gamers experiencing some level of harassment. And so add to that, a 2018 study showed that 49% of women who regularly game or regularly use virtual reality had reported at least one episode or incident of sexual harassment. 49% of women had already experienced some level of sexual harassment. And the challenge is, so yes, once we acknowledge these types of crimes, then what happens? Well, part of the challenge is they're not yet seen as crimes. Problem number one, because our technology has advanced so quickly that the legal system has not caught up to it. And so unfortunately, when it comes to our legal definition of some of the more standard crimes like sexual assault, like rape, that the definition of these crimes actually requires some type of physical contact. And so even though someone may have experience or report experiencing rape in the virtual reality, because the law doesn't cover virtual rape, there is no arrest. The police can't do anything. So even if you educate the law enforcement and you inform them, you collect all this data, the problem is they really can't do anything. So you can report it, but then nothing happens because they are powerless, because there really is no law that defines these experiences as a crime. So that's a major issue. And some people are saying we need more time to research these types of incidences before we criminalize them. Okay, I know my thoughts about that. I want to hear what you have to say about that, because some people are saying like we just don't really know enough. Even though there's emerging research that has shown that people who do have these experiences have the same type of psychological impact as victims or survivors of real life sexual violent crimes. So do we need more research? Do we need to really understand these Because the caveat to that would be, the over criminalization of certain populations. And I think that's where people are trying to weigh out the two. Is this now going to become a new avenue where we're going to continue to see disparities in the criminalization of certain minoritized groups? Should we do more research on this? Do we need more research? What do you think, Kendra?
I think we need something. So I was having a few different thoughts. Like, I do like the fact that people they're not trying to just, jump and do something, because we have a lot of history of just doing things super quickly without having things to back it up. So I think that, there's some grace for that, because you don't want to, go through the steps and putting things in legislation and all those things, and you're like, oh, we need to think about that. But it also can be
Very
ongoing.
true.
And it can be ongoing and be amended, or whatever the terms are, as that more research develops. But it's like, I don't need, if I'm, because I work with children, so I'm like, my brain is always like, if something happens to one of my kids, I don't need no research. I need you to find them in that, whether it is to, especially if it's illegal, but if there's some gray area, is it causing harm, and is it intentional?
Right.
And what is the goal? Because again, I'm thinking there is one thing, if I'm playing, whether it's games or like I'm immersed in the metaverse, or I don't care, a cell phone game. If the purpose of my game is for me to be collecting fruit, I need to be collecting fruit. I don't need to be collecting body parts.
Right.
So what like, and so anybody that violates the purpose or the role of whatever the space that I agree to be in, then that needs to be handled. Whether that is, if we start small with them losing restriction to the access. Now, of course, we know, IP addresses and email addresses and all of that. But for the average person doesn't know nothing about setting up no VPN and blocking that. But they could also be, what I'm saying? Now, there are people who are like, oh, that's nothing. And even with them talking about, the whole like TikTok ban, and people are just like, child, let me show you how to get around that. It'll have you think your phone is in China, you'll be fine. Or maybe not China, maybe Japan.
Uh-huh.
You know what I mean? But there's so there's that, that fine line, because I think people are also nervous, because like you said, like, we don't want to over criminalize, but then it's also I am so, could be the thought of like, I am just so scared because this is so unknown, or we haven't even touched it. But also that it doesn't necessarily have to be illegal for it to be wrong.
Right.
When you think about how far we've come. I'm a Black woman. So, there were so many things that were legal but wrong.
Right.
There was no research needed.
Right. Like, there's a certain level of a moral compass that you should know that certain things are just inherently wrong. You're right.
Yeah, and I hate the fact that, we have to experience some sort of suffering for things to come out. But it's just like, I'll make a lighter joke and get it. So there's always this talk about the beauty industry with booking hair appointments or nail techs and all these. And they say they always come with these 600 rules. You can't bring this. You got to have your hair. They have all these rules.
Yeah.
And one of my friends, she said, well, most of the time people have these rules because they've experienced blank. Like, it was started off fine until they experienced this. And like, you used to could be able to bring your kids until somebody's kid messed up my shop. And now no.
Right.
Now you don't
And we do say that. We do say that. Like, when there's a new rule or something that seems kind of odd, we're always like, oh, who messed up?
Okay, because who did that? And so now it's like, so when you think about, the terms and conditions, who's reading those, right? Like, when you think about all of the things, it's like, okay, so now, I think constantly updating and spot checking. I think even just asking, like those little prompted questions, because I've been seeing them a lot on, I've seen a lot on YouTube and TikTok. They'll ask, like, how is this content? Like, whatever you scroll by, like, is this something that you're interested in? Like, is this something that you think other viewers should watch? Like, is it, like that they're, kind of seeing. And I think it may even be worthwhile for them, or whomever the platforms are, to even add that, like, how is your experience today? at any point did you feel blah, 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 blah. Just sort of like, just kind of mark it and kind of spot check. Because if it's something that they haven't reported, because sometimes you just want to be done, like take the headset off, you know,
Right.
but then have that follow up
Right.
in some regard, or you know, have even if it's a safe space or forum for those, because I think there's with any, especially with any form of assault, is usually, you know, so stigmatized, it's scary, it's embarrassing, because you have that, like, is it my fault? Is it this? Is it that? You know, and so I think, you know, there's some more conversations need to be had, but while the conversations are being had, there needs to be action in place. Like I said before, whether it's suspending the violators' accounts, whether it's indefinitely a period amount of time till it's under review, or you know, something, because there's no because what is that saying to the virtual victim? Is
Right.
that like this can happen, and then they can go get their tea and do it to another person
Right.
or people or child or
Right.
whomever may unknowingly be in that. But I do like the added. I wrote it down. What is the safe zone? Like the what we said that with them. I love that that's an option. And to add to why people may not even remember to do that, you know, it's very simple. It's our body's defense mechanism is what fight, flight, or freeze. And so for some, if you even just think about how people respond to natural disasters or active shooters, like you know what I'm saying, we all we're wired to respond differently. You have those that are just like, we need to get this person. We have some that are like, I'm getting out of here, and we have some that are just stuck and need somebody to physically move them. And it doesn't mean that something's wrong. It's just how how you're wired, and we may need to learn, add some additional coping skills. But it is interesting.
I think that's great tips, and I'm kind of disappointed these platforms aren't proactive about thinking about these possibilities. And it's not that you go around thinking about perverts and potential perverts every day, or predators every day. But I do think that because sexual violent crimes are so prevalent in our society, both for male and female and all identified genders, all levels of self-identification, there is no ethnic group, no race that is not victim to sexual violent crimes. And so the fact that it's so prevalent, I think it's something that they should have been mindful of to start with, because predators had already existed in the gaming industry. They already exist on social media. And so, of course, if you create this universe,
and they already existed on the street.
Right, exactly.
Pre-internet, kids were being
And so
assaulted.
there's precedence for this, right? There was already some level of virtual interactions in which predators had already existed. So the fact that now you have a minor who had allegedly, I guess I have to say, this particular experience is very alarming. And I think also, to your point, bringing up about the, take the headsets off, I think people also are not mindful that because sexual violent crimes are so prevalent, that there is likelihood that individuals who have these experiences have already had some type of sexual violent experience. Even more so, to have the layered experience of having a real life sexual violent crime. I believe that one of the survivors, who was an archery gamer in 2006, had shared this. She mentioned that she had already had an experience of being groped in real life in Starbucks, allegedly. All this information, and we have yet to touch how artificial intelligence is being used by predators. You're going to want to know that information. So thank you for joining us, and make sure you catch part 2. How could they reach you? How could they follow you?
You can reach me at Pooh Smiles, Pooh like Winnie the Pooh, Smiles like my teeth. I am Pooh Smiles on all platforms. For those that use Facebook, it's Kendra Sims. And yeah, I'm an author. You can type in Kendra Sims on Amazon, it pops right up.
Thank you for reminding me about that. Yes, she is. Make sure you check that out. And I am, as always, Dr. T, the hand behind the handle of Healthy Bump Club, right here on YouTube. and also the hand behind the handle of healthybump.club on Instagram. We thank you guys for joining us, for watching this episode. Let us know what you think, because these areas are nuanced. There is no precedent for these experiences. So we're all in this together. So share with us what you think about these types of incidences and what you think we need to do. And I think we need to start with changing the laws, but we're going to do a little bit of research first. And that being said, make sure you come back to join us for another fabulous episode. We see you guys when? Next episode. Yeah.